musicianship video commentary. In my piece I decided to start with a simple chord sequence. I did this because I felt it was the easiest part of the piece I could build on. Once I had got my simple chord sequence, I decided to add some 7th and 9th chords. I decided to do this as it allowed me to feel another part of the assignment brief while also keeping the piece sounding as good as possible. I used A minor 7th and D minor 9th as I liked the tone they gave out to the rest of the piece. The reason I did my chord sequence on the piano was because I was able to see what I was going to do better, and also allowed me to try different ideas easier, as playing chords on the piano is what I find easiest. The next thing I decided to do was choose which parts of the piece I wanted to use simple time and where I wanted to. I used 3/4 and 5/4 and 5/4. I decided to include both these in the chord sequence as I felt it was the best place for the change while keeping it easy enough to play. Now I had my bass to my piece, which included some of the assignment brief. I went onto the guitar using the key I started in, which was C. I improvised around the scale to create a melody. While doing that, I also found a nice little chromatic sequence, which was also part of the assignment brief, to break up the scale. Once I had added the chromatic sequence, I went back into the scale and used the note D to add modulation. I modulated to the scale of D, which I felt went well with the rest of the piece. Once I had added and included my modulation between C and D, I decided it was time to build up to something different. I decided to do this on the piano as it was the easiest way to build up suspense. To do this I used suspended chords and also a compound time signature. Now I was not worrying as much about how the piece sounded as it was going all over the place. Next I decided to take this time to play some random notes, atonal. I did this by playing the notes that were not in any set order or in a key. In terms of tempo, I started at a standard 128 beats per minute during the chord sequence and suspension and modulation, and then for the chromatic sequence and the scale I used 90 beats per minute. This meant that it differentiated from each part of the brief so each standed out. The reason I decided to compose my piece on the piano and the guitar was because I felt that they were the two easiest instruments to play all the parts needed for a successful piece. I also know these instruments better than any others, so before I started I already had some ideas on what I could do, i.e. simple chord patterns and scales.